Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my two guests on with me this time, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Hey, you know the first.
No, it's always ladies first, baby.
I know. Hey everyone, my name is Nita Creekmore. I feel like I do a lot. I'm a wife to Michael Creekmore. I'm also a mother of 4 amazing children. We have a dog. That's the personal side of me. I remembered Hamilton. I did. Okay. This time I remembered him. And then also I have been in education for, this is now my 21st year in education. I have been an instructional coach for 7 years. And this year I have decided to enter back into the classroom. So I'm back in the classroom teaching 5th grade ELA. And I'm also coaching as well, a little bit of coaching on the side. So doing a little bit of both right now. And also a co-author to Every Connection Matters with my husband.
And a solo author too, I might add. I don't want to toot your horn for you.
Yeah. You can pre-order my other book, but yeah.
What's the name of that book, by the way?
Reading Outside Your Bubble about diverse books.
Shameless plug. Sorry, got to do a proud husband moment.
Absolutely.
My name is Michael Creekmore. I am a licensed professional counselor for over 15. I'm heading towards 20 now. Now I'm thinking about it. I am a school counselor, professional school counselor as well in elementary school, K through 5. And I am also a certified professional counselor supervisor, which means that I supervise those and help those who are aspiring to become licensed professional counselors obtain that licensure. So I do that on the side as well, while also consulting for a community counseling agency. And I am most proud of being husband to this beautiful woman, Nita Creekmore, and a father of 4 amazing children, and a dog dad, and a self-proclaimed sneakerhead.
So, yes, definitely a sneakerhead. We'll have to talk about those double sneakers in your stories.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
That's us.
So the reason, I have you guys on today is to really push back, if you will, on this sentiment and this notion that I've seen, which is almost that have you built a relationship has become a triggering thing for folks in the teacher realm, teachergram and spaces, right? And ultimately, the idea here is that relationships still matter. You all have wrote extensively on the subject, but you have framed it under the auspices of connection.
Yeah.
I think language is intentional. So I'd love for y'all to talk a little bit more about what you mean when you say connection and why you chose that word versus relationship and other things that are thrown out in the educational space.
You want to talk on that?
Yeah. Well, I can go first.
Yeah.
So I really feel like when we use the word connection, when you're first establishing that relationship, there are stages to a relationship. When you have a connection with someone, all that's simply saying is there's something that you may have in common, a mere commonality that you have. It could be something as, simple as Bobby's wearing a button-up shirt right now. If I had one on, that would be a connection, right?
Yeah.
That could be a quick jump-off point to actually create some type of commonality that you have with the individual that you're meeting and that you do not know. Mm-hmm. So when we say every connection matters, we're talking about how a connection is a gateway to a relationship. It's stages.
Yeah, and even for it's so interesting. We wrote the book based off of conversations we were having in the house, just coming back home, things that he would see, things that I would see, great things and as well as not so great things. And we started talking about it just starts with a connection. And it doesn't have to be anything so deep. It could just be, for instance, I'm really intentional right now. I'm being in a 5th grade classroom. I'm intentional about starting my morning off at my door. If I'm not at my door connecting with kids in the morning, it kind of throws me off throughout my day because I'm not establishing those connections right then and there. And oftentimes because something that I know I should have done ahead of time to prepare. And it's I'm scuffling around and they're getting the brunt of me not being as prepared as I wanted to be in that moment. And so just even those simple connections that you were saying is that's why we chose that word. Because we feel like that's the jumping off point of relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about just this idea of connection and we think about where our educators are, but particularly on this side of COVID and all the things, it seems like connection is just another thing that we are asking them to do, right? Just get dumped on a lot, right?
Yeah.
You have to be this and that and grade and then make sure we're data informed, and all of these things become almost weaponized in a sense. Teachers can feel like you're asking me to do something on top of all my responsibilities, but I'm not seeing that reflected in my pay and contract,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so what do you say to the person who is listening to you and is like, yeah, it sounds good, but that's just another thing on top of all the other stuff I got to deal with?
You want to?
Yeah. I got a lot to say.
I know. That's why I was
Okay.
like,
Well, okay. So I heard that a lot when my sole job was a coach, right? And 7 years being a coach, I think sometimes I tended to forget how much they had on their plate, right? And it is a lot. Now that I'm back in the classroom, which is really is a blessing in disguise because I have like the coach hat, leadership hat, and then now I'm back into the classroom. What I found is there is a lot of stuff, for lack of a better word, a lot of stuff that's put on teachers' plates. I mean, I will say that just being back in the classroom and really feeling it all. Without relationships, I can't do none of it, right? Like without relationships, I can't dig into curriculum like I want to because they're not tapped in like I need them to be tapped in. Without relationships, classroom management isn't on par, right? Because I have to sit there and manage my classroom because I don't have that relationship with the students because I don't know. I know that my student Tommy is coming in. I had to pick someone who wasn't in my class. Tommy is coming in and I could tell he's off. And the reason why I know he's off is because I have a relationship with him, right? Yeah. And so I can meet him at the door. I can go to the door and be like, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's check in, right? Without any of that, then like nothing can occur. There's nothing else that can happen. And so, so I could keep going, but go ahead.
No, I just want to interject. Yeah. I just want to just interject something real quick, but now I want you to keep going.
Yeah.
And even with that, if you don't have a relationship with the people that you need, like other staff that you need, your admin, your counselors, guess what? Sometimes they get to your room a little later because they don't really know what you got going on or to have that relationship with you like that. Now, I'm not saying it's intentional, but we know when it's someone that we know, we have that relationship, we're a little bit more prone to go check in on them to see what's going on, right? It's the same thing in the school. And if you don't have that relationship, it makes it really hard for someone to really be able to go in there and check on you like as fast as you would like them to. Let's just be real. Let's just call it what it is. It's the reality of the business that we're in, right? It's relationship building. So I just wanted to put that part in there, that plug in there.
That was huge. I just think it takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of self-awareness for yourself as a teacher to know when you're off. It takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to be in the classroom and really a high level of emotional intelligence that we have to build amongst teachers because I can tell when a kid is something ain't right, right? I could be in the middle of teaching and I can tell a student is off. Something ain't right. And so those moments I'll make sure I teach, I'll do my listening lesson. They're over there doing what they need to do. And I pull that student. I'm like, hey, you good? Like did something just occur? I could tell those things happen in the midst of teaching because we can't get to what we need to get in our teaching and learning if we don't have that relationship. We just can't do it. It's just it can't happen. And so I get how it can be triggering with everything else going on, but relationships are the plate. Like it's not like everything is it, so.
Yeah, I love that. Relationships are the plate, particularly because much of what you're saying is thinking about it as this ancillary or extra side dish will rob you of the power it can have to support all the things you have to do anyway. Right? The job is instruction. The job is growing and developing young people. And if you feel like relationships are this optional side, then one, it tells me that you have not you're not in touch with anything our young people are telling us. That's one.
Yeah.
Right.
And then two, it tells me how little you think of the power that connection and relationships can have to those things that we're talking about. You know, I think about both of your roles respectively. And this is going to be a two-parter. One, I think a lot of people when they think about writing books or authorship, they think about how the book will ultimately change an area, impact a sector. But I think sometimes we fail to think about how the process of authorship changes the author. And I'm thinking about both of you, husband and wife, writing this book, collaborating together, and having to nail down what it is that you collectively wanted to say with one voice to a myriad of people who will pick up your book and say, okay, this is what I want to communicate to them. So take me behind the scenes a little bit. As you are writing this book, were there moments where you had to look at each other and be like, no, like I don't know. Can we say that differently? Like where maybe even in that process there was some refinement and your message came out even better because you had those discussions behind the scenes.
Bobby, you already know. It was definitely a process. There were a couple of chapters in our book where there was one chapter in particular, we had to go back and pretty much rewrite that chapter because it was very cathartic. We were able to get a lot of things out. And when we went back and we were in a better space, we read it and we said,
We went in.
we went in. I'm talking about we went all the way in, pulled out a chair at the table and had a seat.
Yeah, we were.
Like
Okay.
we went in. So we had to go back and rewrite that chapter.
The entire chapter.
That chapter will remain nameless.
I can name it.
However, well, not because it might be.
That was my question, but you don't have to. No pressure.
I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. So it was
teacher to leader.
Yeah, teacher to leader.
It was our teacher to leader chapter, and we were both going through some things with our leaders at the time, and I think writing the first time was really cathartic.
Yeah.
But then we had to kind of dig deep down into like leadership. It actually drove that chapter to be one of the strongest chapters we feel like because it had both sides. That was one of our chapters we actually did, teacher to leader and leader to teacher. And we got to dive deep into like some really, really amazing transformational leadership that for me personally I had forgotten about. And I'm like, yo, how did I forget about that? Because I was so deep.
Yeah. Forgot about it because we were in the trenches of were we allowed to use any language or
hardship?
Yeah. You can.
Yeah, we were in the middle of the shitstorm. So I mean, we couldn't. It was hard to really reflect on the rainbows and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow when it's raining poop on you. So you kind of looking like. So it took us a minute to get that out. Once we got it out, we were good.
And that was where we were aligned. And our editor was like,
"But y'all mad?
Y'all big mad right now.
Y'all mad."
And part of it was just because of just things that we didn't agree with. You know what I mean? And we're really human focused, and things that we didn't agree with that was happening. Human centered, and it was pissing us off. Yeah. And we both were in the same building. We had different leaders, and at the time,
we were in two different. We were not in the same building. And I know for me, I can speak to it that I have a very difficult time when I feel like someone's not really even seeming to attempt to connect or even really attempting to even listen. And the things that you're saying, you're coming into a new space that you're not really familiar with, and you're kind of spouting out all these things and not listening to the people who actually know the kids in which we're serving. And you're telling us things that we know are going to be counterproductive, and it's going to end up being more work because once we do it, it's going to fail because we know we've tried it. It's not going to work, and we're going to have to do double the work. So it's very frustrating. Yeah. And for me as a person, I don't do well with that. And I'm a very direct person. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Yeah. And that could be a gift and a curse. I don't really look at the position like, oh, I have to make sure. No, you ask, you put your pants on one leg at a time, just like I do. we can sit down like two adults and have this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, but I'm going to preface it, before, are you sure you want to have this conversation? Because I'm a very direct person.
Yeah.
So I give you the disclaimer. So if you decide to proceed, then everything that follows next, I'm not going to be disrespectful or anything like that, but I'm going to let you know how things could benefit both of us. And if you choose not to do that, I'm going to tell you what I think those potential consequences can be in a respectful way.
I mean, sometimes he'd come home and I'd be like, you said that? But I mean, and that was definitely one chapter where we were aligned and we like had to redo. And there were some other spaces where me and Mike just we weren't in agreement. Like we just had to, some of it was word choice. Some of it was, we were splitting hairs on words, like just on how to put it out there.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like
storytelling
or like,
one story versus another story, which story would be told.
Yeah. Or which one? Yeah. And so we also, those were areas where we.
Yeah. The vignettes in the beginning.
We would spend
chapters.
I mean, going back and forth, I'd be like, that's not really something that would really happen, or, so different things like that we would definitely split hairs on. Most of the relationship building things, we kind of were aligned.
Yeah.
We're very much alike in that. It's just, I do it my way, he does it his way. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. We were trying to come to a general understanding there. That's why at the end of each chapter we have Mike's story and Nita's story. That's kind of where that came in, because it was kind of like, okay, you got your story, I got my story.
Like, no, I don't agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. Okay, well, I'm telling mine, you tell
your story.
So, let's stay there for a second. So it's been a while since we caught up. So in real time here, last 2 years at the place that I serve, I was the assistant principal.
Okay.
And this is my first year as principal in that building.
Oh, okay.
And so I bring that up to say, one, sitting in the chair in your building is a very interesting space to be in, considering what you're talking about. Because there are times where folks, this is my particular, where I'm at, right? So let me preface that. But there are times where folks have understandings from their seat, but don't know what it's like to sit in your seat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then, but then on the other side, I've learned that you can walk and try to lead with levels of compassion, humanity, and connection. And yet, because you're in the middle of a story that's already been written, you have to almost undo layers of leadership trauma that folks have come in with before they actually build that trust. And that is something that you all talk about in your work.
Yeah.
It is this transition from transactional leadership where I do this thing, you do that thing. And that's typically how, at least in my experience, education runs. It's very transactional. You do this work, you get this grade.
Yeah.
You do this activity, you do whatever the thing is, there's this for that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've learned that the transition to transformational leadership is very tough for folks when they've been used to transactional.
Yes.
And that the key is that trust.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about, one, how key trust is. I know it can't be overstated, but if you could talk to us about like maybe what people aren't keyed in on when it comes to rebuilding or connecting over that trust issue that happens in a lot of spaces.
I feel like trust is paramount, mainly because if you're someone walking in to a new situation, it's already an atmosphere of some people don't like the fact that you're in that position. Some people are glad you're in that position. Some people are kind of like, rooting for you and cheering you on, while there's some people trying to snatch the rug out from underneath you. So it's almost like the doggone Hunger Games when you become a new admin, or even if you just becoming admin period, just becoming an admin period. It's a lot. And from a counselor perspective, I always felt like I got to see that. And my role was always a little different. So I didn't experience the teacher side of it, because a lot of times in a lot of buildings, counselors are almost like sometimes we can be the de facto admin, if that makes any sense. If admin's out of the building, all the teachers are looking like, hey, can you, I got an emergency. I need to report to you or talk to you about it. It sounds overwhelming, and I get it, but I also understand the whole trust piece of it is I can't overstate the fact that it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that has to happen where as you're coming in as a new admin, there are little things that you can do to try to set the stage and build trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know my wife will talk more about that, so I won't really go into that. But speaking as a person, as the educator that's receiving that new admin, I think a lot of times hearts are hardened, and it's not even just admin; it's really towards the profession itself.
Mm-hmm.
But so they kind of feel like it's just another thing that checks in the box of this is why I'm so damn sick of this job.
Yeah.
See, countdown, I got 4 more years.
Mm-hmm.
See, here we go, switching again. I just got used to the last principle, and here we go. So it's an uphill battle that a lot of new admin face.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tap out and let you go.
Because I feel like I am in the midst of that. And I feel like for me, I'm new to my building. I'm not new to teaching, but I'm new to my building. And for me, it's that to establish trust for me is to have a safe space to land. And that just means I can tell you things and talk to you and feel like my voice is heard, and then not just heard, but then something is done about it, whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
I think trust does go both ways. Like for instance, I mean, this is a little bit of just the education field about like, okay, turn in your lesson plans and do all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll turn it in. That's fine. Don't laugh. Shut up.
Sorry. Because I know that. Yeah.
So, I mean, it is, some buildings are like that, and that's cool. That's your thing. That's fine.
Can I just real quick? I'm so sorry. I just want to say something with regard to the lesson plans. Sometimes, okay, what folks may not understand is you are the middle of middle management.
Yeah.
Right. So while I might be in the seat of principal, I still have to answer to folks who have to answer to folks.
Yep.
And so sometimes I gotta be like, turn your lesson plans in because folks are checking.
Right. And I totally get that and that's why I make sure my lesson plans are done Monday morning.
Yeah.
But what I was telling Mike one day was that,
and that's why I'm laughing. That's why I'm laughing.
Truly, it makes me accountable to truly and be more intentional, because the whole point of lesson planning is so that you can be intentional about your teaching, right?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily like a checking the box. I get it, right? So like for me to do it, I'm like, okay, it makes me think about, okay, what resources I'm going to pull, what standards am I going to teach, what am I going to who am I going to pull, who do I know needs help here? So it makes me be very intentional. So I appreciate that part. So like if I'm going to turn it in, like I was telling I'm going to make sure my stuff is tight, because that helps me in my teaching each day, right? So
thank you.
Yes. So I do want to say that part, right? Yeah. And there are levels to it, because I think, like for me as a veteran teacher, like I told him, I could go in and I could teach with my eyes closed, and it still won't be as intentional as when I do my plans. Okay, so like I'm being real about that. I could do it, and I would have my kids grow and move the needle, but probably not as much as if I would have been more intentional in my planning. But so the whole thing about trust is, so I say that to say, admin trusts that I'll do that every Monday, because that's something that I make sure that I do. So that I'm doing that part, my part. They trust that when they come into my room, they're going to see good teaching, right? Yeah. That's that side of trust. Yeah. And then the other side of trust is me being able to air some of my grievances with my admin and allow them to hear me and coach me through whatever it is that I have a grievance on. Now, maybe they can't change whatever policy is bothering me, but coaching me through that is everything. And so for me as an educator, for me to feel that, and I've told Mike, like I was like, I just felt like this has been bothering me. I talked to admin about it. I felt like my voice was heard. She or he coached me through that. And now I'm looking at that with a different mindset and saying, okay, I have, even as the leader in me, the coach in me, I still have some growing to do in this area. And that just happened recently. And that was a hard pill to swallow, to see something, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm still a learner, even though I've had 21 years in education. Sometimes different people trigger me, and I have to be able to maneuver that in a way that allows for us to move the needle for our students. So trust goes both ways.
I think that big piece that you just said there is something that educators almost miss entirely because we've been trained to spot the needs of others. We would almost have a PhD if we're doing our job in finding out what our students need, what's going on, how do we check in, but then knowing ourselves, knowing our triggers, knowing what sets us off and why, like that piece sometimes is missing and goes a long way to helping us navigate the connections between colleagues. And I love that y'all didn't stop at the connections with students, right? Because often we forget that the connection with the staff will always affect the connection with the students.
100%.
If we're not vibing and gelling, if we don't believe, if we don't hone in on the mission, if we don't really take our vision seriously, come back to it, how are we doing? Let's check in. If we don't do any of that type of stuff, then none of the other stuff matters. And we're never going to hold the students to it. And so I love that you talk about that connection piece because I believe connection is foundational for the culture that we're talking about, right? So to that, let me ask you this question.
Okay.
When you are, let's say both of you are now on the other side walking into a building. You are the consultants, you are the speakers for the day. However, you're walking into a district, walking into a building, and you are seeing a thriving culture. You're witnessing it. Paint a picture for us about what the connections look like from admin to teacher, from teacher to teacher, from teacher to student, and from student to student. Talk to us about what all that looks like, because I think often we drill down on what things aren't. I complain about all the things, but we don't have a vision for what could be or what is or what we're striving for. So help us see that.
It's so interesting because the original title of our book was The School of Relationships. That was before we honed in on Every Connection Matters. And when we first started talking through, we started with that vision of what it looks like when you're going into a thriving community, when you go into a thriving culture. And it does start, I would even say, in the front office. When you're in the front office and it's like a routine, or people are in there and it's like you're being greeted at the door. You're being, would you like some water?
It's the hub.
It's the hub of everything. And you can see so much beautiful culture, and you can see a culture that is chaos.
And complete disarray.
Just from being in the front office. Now, we know that, we've both been in schools for a long time, so we know that sometimes some days are can be like a lot going on. But we can even see it in just how we're greeted at the door. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because I remember even before I was officially a school counselor, when I was still a community mental health professional, I would go into the schools, right? So, going to the schools, where do you have to go first? To the front office. And I could always, while sitting there waiting to meet with a teacher before I met with the student, I could always tell what the vibe was at the school.
Yeah.
You can tell people coming in, people being very short with other people, because keeping in mind, I'm a trained therapist. So I pick up on body language, micro expressions and all those things like that. So you can see a lot. So once that happens, that front office piece it sets the stage for your time there in the school. And you can see so much, whether kids coming in, kids being talked to crazy, go over there, and then we just told you we're going to call, or the teacher comes in there and is, I need more copies. They said you were going to do this and they didn't bring, I went to talk to the technology support person. They still didn't get my computer fixed. All those things that you hear and see.
Yeah.
It's like welcoming someone into your living room.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're welcoming them into your living room. They get to see they have a front row seat to see what's going on.
And sometimes it's like, going in and one of the leaders may come up and greet us, and say, hey, we knew you were coming. Da, da, da. And so as we walk through the building, then me and Mike we have talked about this vision. It's like you see things I see is teachers connecting with students, right? Sometimes if they're getting onto a student, which happens, I mean, they're kids, it could be them talking to them on the side, right? And having that conversation rather than hearing
the public shaming,
the shaming, the yelling, you can hear all of those rings in the building as you're walking through. And so you see teachers laughing with each other, joking with each other.
You can see custodians walking through, walking down the hallway, smiling because maybe they enjoy being in that class. They stop for a second to look at the lesson. Those are things that look like harmony in a school, like a good school environment. Kids going through the lunch line, and you may say something slick, and instead of the food service worker motioning for someone to come to get this student, maybe they have a jovial conversation right there in the line and make it a very lighthearted instead of something serious. Things like that. We don't expect it to be perfect,
but
you can see who has the relationships and who doesn't.
And we see visible leaders.
Yes.
And the leaders are visible, right? And they're going into.
You mean I can't hide in my office all day?
No, you cannot.
Yeah.
No, you cannot.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's the thing. I know that there's things that have to get done in leadership. There's
100%.
paperwork and there's emails and there's just, you're so inundated with all that. And there's a time for that. And one thing that when I was going through the leadership program was setting up times. One thing that leaders can do is set times in their schedule. This is the time, unless there's an emergency or whatever, this is the time, my visible time. And you let your secretary know, this is the time I'm visible, then I'm going to be, unless they'll need me, blood,
hold calls, take messages,
whatever, because it means so much to teachers when you're just visible, and not just because you have your computer and doing our evaluation, right? And so that me as a teacher, oh, she's a little off today. I'm not going to take this evaluation today because I know this ain't usually how she vibes.
Yeah.
Those types of things. It's just we want for our students, teachers want for our students the same thing that for leaders for our teachers. But those are some things that the
same thing that students want from their teachers.
Right.
It's all
interconnected. And I know saying that it's a family can also be triggering. So I don't want to, but it's definitely a pleasant place to go to. And that used to be something that me and Mike used to talk about a lot too, because it's if I'm in an environment where I'm not happy to go to work every day, and it has nothing to do with the kids. The kids usually aren't the reason that people leave.
No, it's not. No matter how many videos or comments did you hear about this kid tore up this classroom or did this, it's rarely the kids that were the final say in whether or not that educator stayed or left.
Yeah.
Teachers usually leave environments.
Yeah.
As I think about that, I agree. Obviously, one of the things that I've tried to do, and sometimes it's better than others because you know how it goes in education. Sometimes your failure to plan becomes my emergency, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. But I got my team all these rolling desks because I said I didn't want us in our offices. I want us out, visible, in the hallways. You could still get your work done if you needed to, but you're going to be out in the hallway so people can see, listen, we're out, we're supportive, we're visible, we're making sure students are doing what they're supposed to do. They know we're watching, things like that. And while I would love to say that every day I'm on that thing, I'm not. It's still something that we're working through, right? But I can say that I'm visible every day. Walking through hallways, checking on teachers, do you need anything, and things like that. And part of the reason that I want to do that is I want to continuously make little deposits in that trust, because at some point I'm going to have to ask you to do something that you don't want to do.
Yep.
At some point, I can't explain the why behind why I'm asking you to do the thing that I'm asking you to do. And I need you to trust that if I'm asking you for it, that I have done enough on the front end to make you feel like, okay, he's done enough. Okay, I can trust this. Let me just do it.
Yes.
Right. And I say all of that to say that I think the reason that transformational leadership is hard is because embedded in transformation is the idea of change.
Right.
And folks can't stand change as much as folks feel like change is necessary. When
Yeah.
it comes time for them to have to be the
Yep.
recipient of the thing that they are asking for, that's when stuff goes left. Because I want everything else to change around me. I was good. I'm the good one. I'm fine. I don't need to change.
Yeah.
It's
When it hits your front yard, you know, people start singing a different tune.
it's
100%.
it's rooted in fear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I could tell this story. I mean, I don't know if I spent a lot of years getting really tight in balanced literacy. I spent a lot of years getting my groups together and learning about balanced literacy. So when the science of reading came, to fruition, it's been out for years and years and years, but when it started being like, this is how students learn to read, it was a hard shift for me at first, because I was like,
Years.
20 years perfecting this craft of teaching kids to read. But then, when I started learning and reading and doing all that, it started to step on my toes, and I started to feel guilt, and I started to feel, and so all of these emotions
and anger
and just stuff like the shift and having to, and all this relearning I have to do. It's just, and I'm still learning. And the reason why I say that is because I do think it's rooted in fear, and even anger to me can be rooted in fear and sadness. And I feel like changes can be challenging because of, like, what if I'm not able to do it the way that I had done it before?
The self-doubt,
right?
Yeah.
What if I can't? What if I'm not the top teacher in this thing? And so I do think that can be the root of it, which is something we have to tackle.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
Bob, if you let me, I wanted to go back to what you were saying too, because when you were saying that you're not in the hallway every day, brother, I don't think any admin should be in the hallway every day. I don't think that should ever be a responsibility, because there's so much that admin is responsible for. As my wife used to always say, teachers have their four walls of their room. Admin has the four walls of the whole entire building.
Oh no, I got
and often with outside of the building. So sometimes you cannot be in the hallway. I say it because
so much.
Some admin will pride themselves on that. I feel like admin is their responsibilities are so great that oftentimes you cannot be in the hallway every day. There's some days that you're not going to be able to be visible because your responsibilities are outside, oftentimes not just the classrooms, but the whole entire building and outside of the building. So the parents, the angry parents, a lot of teachers don't realize admin oftentimes are the people who kind of can head that off. And sometimes that there are things
every day
that happens that they don't even know that you did. So not saying that now all of a sudden I'm transforming to the admin advocate.
Yes, he is.
But I will say that I do feel like it's so important for educators to understand that piece as well, because like you said, trust is a two-way street. So if I'm not out there, please trust and believe there's a reason why I'm not there. Trust and know if I could be, I would be. And then also, just to kind of throw that out there, we did start our book with teacher to self. That means also admin to self. There's some days, just like you may not feel their best self. There's sometimes the admin might need a moment.
Yeah.
Because we're humans.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a moment to kind of gather and collect our thoughts before we go out there and interact. Because if you catch us at the wrong time of day, on the wrong day, you might get a response that you didn't necessarily want or plan or intend to get. So honor that and trust that just because I'm not always visible 100% of the time, that I'm still doing what needs to be done, and trust that you're going to get the best version of me when you do see me.
And I think that transparency piece of sharing, emotions, right, about what's been happening.
Yeah.
I think that also builds trust.
And I just want to not the part of you don't have to tell everything, right? Because I think some spaces they tell it all.
Nah.
Yeah, last night we got into it, and I
but I'm just saying, I'm saying, y'all, today was a really hard day,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I hear a leader say that, I'm like, it makes space for me also to have hard days,
Yeah.
right? And for me, like, okay, yeah, we're normalizing the fact that sometimes, as much as we love education and are passionate about students, that some days are hard, and that happens.
100%. Well, I want to say, man, now that I think about it, it has been a while since we've been rocking with each other and connected and just
Yeah.
supporting.
Yeah.
I just literally had a flashback, like, wow, it's been a while.
Yeah.
So I appreciate y'all dearly. I'm super proud of the work that y'all are doing and continue to do. And I want to, from that place of just honestly just a whole lot of admiration and respect, ask you to speak to something for me. And that is this political climate that we are in. Folks are going to feel like it's going to be hard to be their authentic self, which is what you advocate for in your work, what you advocate for in your lives. Could you speak to the person who is feeling that fear and just give some pointers in terms of how to navigate that while still holding on to the realities of, listen, I got to work, I got to feed my family, but I know authenticity is what's needed. So how do I balance these seemingly competing truths? And then with that, please plug where folks can get in touch with you and connect with you.
Yeah, I definitely had some hard weeks these past couple of weeks since the beginning of November. And one thing I had to, for my own self, and I can just talk about me, is I had to be true to myself, regardless of who is in the White House, true to these kids that I teach each and every day. It's a blessing that I do have a community. And I think if you are struggling with being your authentic self, is make sure you have a community. It's hard. I've been there. It's hard to be in a community that kind of pushes back on diverse literature, or teaching truth, or
social emotional
learning, all those things that we know benefits the whole child and benefits ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
To do that work alone. And I would say get in community with like-minded folks in your buildings, in your districts, and to continue doing this work, and because the work continues regardless of who's in office. And that's just my take on it.
100%.
I definitely agree with that. And I feel like there are hard conversations to be had, mainly because I'm of the school of thought that whenever a person walks into a school building and they're constantly being someone that they're not, constantly trying to play a role, a piece of them dies each day because you're trying to play or try to be someone that you genuinely not as an educator.
Yeah.
And you're in places where you're being kind of like, the best way to say it is you're being tolerated, not celebrated. And I'm not saying that every day needs to be, oh yeah, you need to do things just the way you would do it all the time. No, but what I am saying is if you do find yourself moving forward in a situation where there's such a strong pushback that it does start to really affect you mentally and emotionally, it is really time to consider, okay, there may be an accident needs to take place. And I don't take that like, and I'm not saying that like, just get up and go find another job. Right. No, but having to start putting the work and plan in place to prepare that exit is extremely important. So I definitely agree with my wife, finding the community. But if it becomes so overwhelming to you to where you find yourself high blood pressure, because we know that when we're truly stressed out, it starts to affect our health and it shows up in different ways. So really thinking about what the exit may look like. Another
thing I'm going to say is make sure you get involved in knowing about what policies are being in place, be aware, because and try to get involved there and get your voice heard, and spaces is going to be key.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all, man, so much for sharing space with me. How can folks get in touch with you, tap into your work, buy your book?
Yeah. So you can buy our book. We have the book, right? Every Connection Matters. Thank you, Bobby, for having us on here talking about our book.
Yes.
You can buy it from ASCD. You can also get it from Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can find us on Creekmore Conversations. We have a YouTube channel. We also have Creekmore Combos on
Instagram. And we were previously on.
We're no longer on Twitter.
We're no longer on Twitter.
But
we had to say goodbye to Twitter.
Yeah. But you can find us on Threads.
Awesome. Listen, to the Liberation Lab community, please support this wonderful couple, their work and what they're putting out. I believe wholeheartedly in the work that they're doing. And just like they said, every connection matters. And I just want to press upon us who are listening that I love that they did not stop with the student and teacher relationship, right? That it permeates the entire building. It is the bus drivers, it is the crossing guards, it is the cafeteria staff, it is the custodial staff, that literally our connections with each other are the thing that they are the plate, the foundational ingredient from which everything else can flow. And so thank y'all again for spending this time, and thank y'all for the work that y'all putting out into the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bobby. We appreciate you, man. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yes.
Yeah.